So let's go ahead and cover Chapter A, Creating HTML Files. And this is a very short chapter, and I know that we did this a couple of weeks ago, but it's good to go ahead and do it again just so we can kind of refresh our minds on how to create HTML files. Okay, but first of all, let's go ahead and discuss the IDEs, which is Integrated Development Environment, which is really just the program that you're using, the program or software that you're using to create your HTML file. So what I recommend is Notepad++. And of course there are other IDEs like well, there's NetBeans, there's just so many other different programs that you can use, but you can also use Notepad. Notepad really wouldn't be considered an IDE, it's just a text editor, but still you can use the text editor to create HTML files if that's all you have. Okay, so that's IDE. And basically remember that when you're using IDE specifically, or basically any software really, I mean, if you're using Microsoft Word, most likely it'll default as an extension as DOC or DOCX, depending on the different version you're using. Now, when it comes to IDEs, or even if you're using Notepad, you would have to do the save as option under file so you can make sure that it's going to have the .htm extension. So let me use the example of Notepad. If I were to open up Notepad, which I have here, if I'm going to create an HTML file with Notepad, I just do File, Save As, and it defaults as .txt, and it only gives me the other option is all files. So we can choose that. So we can do, I'm going to call it saving.html. So now I have a HTML file called saving. Now, if I were to try to open it in the browser, it just wouldn't have anything because it might even be confused like, no, it's an HTML file, so it still will open it, but it just won't have anything. Okay, so that's saving the file. And of course, if you're using an IDE like Notepad, you can just do File, Save As, and it gives you all the options because it is a more powerful software. But you just leave it as hypertext markup language, type in your name, and then hit Save. Okay, index. Index is good for you to know because that is what your main web page would actually be called. So if you haven't, or maybe you would have noticed that when you go to any web page that you want, let's say alamo.edu, let me go ahead and type that in, alamo.edu. Notice that you don't have to type any web page name here because all of the web pages, you have to have a page to have something showing. So why don't you have to type in anything here? It's just alamo.edu. You press enter and now you're automatically on the Alamo College's website. Well, it's because within the folder that they have, the website, there is a page called index.htm or .html. So by default, it already knows that that it needs to go to the index.htm or HTML file. So that's pretty important for you to know. And for this class, you know, we can't exactly just have all of our files called index. So that's why I recommend typing lab 1, lab 2, and on. Okay, and so I talked about the extension. Just as I showed you earlier on the bottom, when you do save as, you always want to make sure that you have either a hypertext markup language here, or if you're using Notepad, you want to make sure to do all files or all files to make sure that you don't have .text at the end, saving .html, .txt. That would just not work because it's not a HTML file. So just to be sure to do that. Okay, and let's see. Okay, so we have HTML. You can use either one of them, but just be sure to be consistent. That just makes it more professional that way. And just as it has it here, you may not have .html or HTML, but just do the whatever select all option and make sure to type .htm or .html at the end. And here's a little note right here about if you're unfamiliar with extensions, you can go to this website. And also what I've done is just, a search on what is this extension for, and you can get feedback. And that's happened to me. I mean, not just because of web pages, but also just as a computer person in general, you might run into an extension that you're not familiar with. So like maybe you're working with images and you're not sure what okay, so the typical images would be JPEG or BMP or PNG, but what if something completely different comes up? I think there's an OCX file. What is that? Well, you can do a search on that and find out what that extension is for. So it's not uncommon to have to figure out a new extension. Okay, and of course it is, you have to be safe about it because, if there's, most likely we all know that exe or executable files, which is a program that you can install on your computer, but you have to be sure that whatever you open is not going to be some sort of virus or something that has just an extension that you're not familiar with. So please just be mindful of that. Okay, so it mentions here about how color coding is. Remember, I mentioned before that I recommend Notepad++ because of the coloring, but you can use any IDE that you are familiar with. And also remember too that Notepad, it does not recognize the code, so it's not going to do any colors. So just be aware of that. But again, it's not necessary. It's just helpful for you because it tells you this is the tag, this is an attribute, this is text. So it's just there to help you when you're using any IDE or editor. Okay, document type. This is actually something that I should have put on the assignment, but I didn't. So it's not going to be for points, but it is something we should start doing, and I will start removing points for not having it. So just be sure that you are aware that I'm going to start requiring this. Basically, the document type is a code, and it's the first line of the code in any HTML page. And it basically just tells the browser what type of page it is. That's all. I mean, it's still pretty important, but it's still it's not really difficult, I guess, but it is still an important line for you to have on your web pages. And it's real simple, and this is really all that it needs to be. Open angle brackets, exclamation point, doc type, HTML, and then close. Boom, you're done. So if anything, so on this web page here, right above the HTML that I have here, you would put open, exclamation, doc type, HTML. Boom, you're done. That line needs to be at the beginning of every web page. Okay, and again, it's just so that the browser knows how to interpret the tags inside. Okay. Here are some wonderful web addresses here for help on things, and that is it for chapter 8.